a lot of Democrats are trying to figure out how they can get the black people who voted for Obama and the black people who came out and voted for Hillary Clinton to come vote for one of these candidates in 2020. And I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Trump is going to win again because black people aren't voting. And unless the Democrats can get black people out to vote, they're going to lose. And they're going to continue losing because black Americans are the cornerstone to the Democratic Party's ability to take to win national elections. And the reason that they're not going to vote is because they're apathetic to the voting process. Here's what you got to understand. It's been 12 years since, or almost 12 years, 11 years. Well, it'll be 12 years in 2020 since Barack Obama was elected president. So now the people that were 20 years old, 18 years old, all of them are now 32, 30 years old. So they're grown-ups. They've dealt with the system. They've paid taxes. On top of that, they've watched black people get beaten up by the police under Obama. They've watched black people get shot by the police under Obama. They've watched all these other special interest groups be granted favors and rights by Obama. They've watched people get beat up by under Trump's black people get beat up and shot under President Trump also. So in effect, the things that affect us most, nothing has really changed under Obama. Nothing has really changed under Trump. Now for other groups, a lot has changed. For transgenders, they're catching hell under Trump. For Latinos and other immigrant groups, they're catching hell. For Africans, they're catching hell. For Arabs, they're all catching hell. Asians, everybody's catching hell. But for the black people, it's pretty much the same. And the best argument that the Democrats can come up with is that, well, your ancestors died for the right to vote. And my whole point to that, and I think a lot of black people understand, is like we have a lot of rights that our ancestors died for. Our ancestors died for, have the right to live in peace and harmony. We have a right to life, liberty, and happiness. But a lot of those rights aren't being observed. You know, we also died for other rights in the 1955 Voters Act and the rights that came before that. You know, along the way after slavery, we gained the right to own land, gained the right to marry, gained the right to live in certain neighborhoods. But for the most part, we don't exercise those rights if they don't benefit us. So the right to vote, okay, vote for who? You got two options. You can vote for a Democrat. If you want to vote for a Republican, you can vote for that ticket. But neither one of those options really changes our circumstance at this point. We're not so drunk on affection and love for any candidate like we were in 2008 for Barack Obama. And so we're not motivated. That's where the apathy comes from. And then on top of that, nothing has really changed. So for you to say our ancestors died for that right to vote, well, they also died for us not to exercise that right. We don't have to own land in a certain place if we don't want to. But that's still our right to do so. Us not buying that land should show you, hey, we're not buying that. Just like we're not buying these candidates. We're not exercising that right to vote. Our ancestors also died for us not to have to be forced to do things that are not in our best interest. And voting for one of these Democratic candidates, putting our stamp of approval on them when they're not really offering anything to black people, you know, that's not what our ancestors died for. That's like me I'm exercising my right to buy land that was formerly a landfill to raise my children in. Like, that's not a right that I want to exercise. That's not a piece of land that I want to buy, yet you're telling me I should do it anyway because my ancestors died for my right to own land. Okay, great. But I'm sure my ancestors wouldn't want me to buy a landfill that's going to make me sick or going to harm me, right? So my ancestors wouldn't want me to vote for a Democratic Party candidate who is going to ignore us, who's going to treat us with the same benign neglect that we've been getting treated with for the past 30 years. And I'm sure our ancestors wouldn't want us to vote for a Donald Trump who is openly racist, is a bigot, you see? So black people don't really have an incentive to vote this year or in 2020. So, and your Democratic Party are not really, you're not really giving us anything tangible that would cause us to want to come out and vote. And you trying to throw a guilt trip on us and say our ancestors died for our right to vote. That's not going to work, because they died for a lot of different reasons, a lot of different rights. So you're going to have to come up with something better than that. Now, I know that there's a mood, black people are in the mood to get reparations. And it's my understanding that would cost trillions of dollars. But, that's a starting point. If this is a negotiation, that's a starting point. That's our high end. We want reparations. But on the low end, one of you Democratic candidates could come out and say, you know what? How about we propose a federal reform that that criminalizes police officers who kill innocent, unarmed black people, or holds them to a certain standard. Just like Obama enacted a law that says that the Blue Lives Matter law. Why don't you enact a law that says Black Lives Matter, or Brown Lives Matter, or Poor People's Lives Matter, which protects black people, brown people, poor people from, because rich people aren't getting shot by the police. They're just not, But if you don't want to just give something specifically for black people, you can code it like that and say this is for all the people who are being shot down by the police and not being charged and not being prosecuted properly in their state courts. We'll put a federal law in the books other than civil rights, that charges them, for their malicious actions, you see, or make it easier to sue these municipalities in federal court when there's a determination that they have a history of this type of activity, or they hired an officer with a history of this type of activity. I mean, you got to give us something. Like I said, you can, reparations is the high end of the negotiations. That's what we're demanding. That's our initial demand. And you guys can counter with something. But the Democrats aren't willing to do that. You're not going to address black people. I guess you just assume we don't have a choice. Since we're going to vote, we either vote for Trump or whoever the Democratic nominee is. But I'm telling you, black people are just going to abstain. They're just not going to exercise that right to vote in the same way we wouldn't exercise the right to buy land that was granted to us under those rights if it's bad, if it's not a good value for us. And that's just what's happening. And I don't think you Democrats understand that. The thing about Barack Obama was he was like a high. He was like a drug. And, once he got elected, we hit the pinnacle. I mean, there were black people in the streets crying, and people were on a euphoric high for about a year and a half, 2 years, but then he kind of let us down. The drug and that high never came back. So he came back in 2012. We voted for him again, waited another 4 years, but we don't see where he actually did anything for us. So now black people are like, there's no high that can match that. You guys aren't, the Democratic Party isn't doing enough to excite black people like Barack Obama did. And as I look at the candidates, you got one lady who's a former prosecutor who is married to a white guy, who went out of her way to prosecute single black mothers. She didn't want men who were unlawfully incarcerated to be compensated or unfairly incarcerated. Innocent men with it. She didn't want them to be compensated for the time they spent in jail. You got Bernie Sanders, who is like old and who was exciting maybe 4 years ago, but at this point he's kind of not really exciting. He just looks like another old white guy, and when asked about reparations, he really didn't want to address it. You got the guy from Texas, Beto O'Rourke, and he's just kind of odd. He wants to take your guns away, but he's not as adamant about the rights of black people as he is about taking guns away. And so who is the one that we can get behind? If Barack Obama was a symbol with no substance, at least give us a candidate with some substance that says, hey, I'm going to cater to you. I'm going to treat you like a special interest group. I'm going to treat the black population like they're the LGBT, like they're the immigrants. I'm going to give, this is something that I'm specially going to do for you. I'm catering to you. And it can't be something like, oh, I'm going to give money to HBCUs. That's great, but HBCUs are federally funded, so they're already getting money. And not every black person goes to college, but every black person is subject to unfair police stops. Every black person would benefit from, not every black person, but especially foundational black Americans would benefit from reparations. So you have to do something and give something back to black people that will cater to them. But the argument that, oh, you're not doing what your ancestors wanted you to do because you're not exercising your right to vote and they died for it, that argument's not going to work. That argument is going to fall on deaf ears. And on top of that, there's a civil war going on in the black community. There's a realigning of power going on in the black community. Black men specifically have seen that black women have failed at leadership, and even though they've been artificially propped up by white benefactors, they've been given jobs, working mostly at a large percentage working for the federal government. They've been given welfare. They've been given all these things. So they're in control of the purse strings. Therefore, they've been calling the shots. But now there's a battle going on. And black men are saying, you know what? You guys failed. You failed at raising children. You don't believe me? Look at the incarceration rate. And look at all those children who are in prison, or there's men who are in prison who were raised by single mothers. Look at the drug epidemic. Look at the out of wedlock birth rate. As the backbone of the black community, as the leaders of the black community, black women have failed, and black men are looking at it and saying, I don't want you leading me. And if this is what's going on in the black community, I'm going to exit the black community. That's why you got 30% of black college graduates who are marrying out because that's their escape. You got another 51% of black men who aren't even getting married. And don't have any kids, so they really have no ties to, the black community via the, black marriage and black relationships, other than, your kind of in and out, stick and move type relationships where, so that is something that we also have to take into account. So we have diverging interest in the black community. Black men and black women don't necessarily see eye to eye on politics. We differ. Black men don't benefit from welfare. Black men don't benefit from these government jobs per se. And so because of that, there's really no need for big government. So although most black men haven't committed to a more conservative party, they still aren't really aligned with the Democratic Party. It's just not there. And there's enough discourse going on amongst black men, especially, for us to realize that. And you're not going to be able to tempt black men back to the table to negotiate by saying your ancestors died for the right to vote. That's not going to work. You're going to have to actually come up with something tangible. You're going to actually have to come up with something viable. And if not, then the Democratic Party is going to fail. And I don't see any foreseeable future where they're actually going to win any more national elections. So, Donald Trump is going to win by default because the Democratic candidates that I see aren't garnering enough attention or admiration or there's nothing there for us, as far as black men. And if you don't get the black men to vote, then black women alone aren't going to be able to put you in office, Democrats. And I don't care. Let me tell you something. I'm not a Republican. I voted Democrat my entire life, but I'm not motivated to vote for president either, and I'm not one of these anti-America type guys. I love the United States. I love the opportunity it presents me, and I can say that from a place of knowledge, and that I've been to other countries, and I see how other people are living in other countries. I've actually lived in other countries, in that I've either rented, owned, and lived in other countries, and there's no place like the United States. And a not vote or a stay at home vote sends the same message as a vote for a Republican or a Democrat, as far as I'm concerned, and many black people. But back to my other point, unless you get black men on your side, unless you start giving them something, okay, they're not going to come out. So one thing you can give them is not just prison reform, that's great, but a punishment mechanism for these police officers, that would be a good step in the right direction. And there are other things too, but I don't have the time to go over all of that right now. But I will tell you that it doesn't really look good for the Democratic Party. And to try to guilt us back to the negotiating table or guilt us into voting. And this is for black women too. Black women aren't going for that because many of the black women are waking up from the nightmare of feminism and realizing that that was a trick and that didn't really work well for black people because, it seems like whenever white feminists need black women are there. But whenever black feminists have issues that affect black women solely, white women aren't there for them. So they're realizing they're being fooled. And so they're kind of fading away. So by default, now black people are kind of talking more amongst each other, and we're having a conversation. And it's very public if you look at social media. And one thing that both black men and black women can agree on is that the politics as it is haven't been very beneficial to us, whether there was a black president or a overtly racist president like Donald Trump. So, that's my thoughts on that. You guys can you can weigh it as you choose, but the proof is going to be in the pudding. You're going to see black people are going to come out to vote, and because of that, Donald Trump's going to win again by default, unless he gets impeached. Anyway, this is Dennis, Ron Unfiltered Dennis. Check out my YouTube page. I'll talk to y'all later.